Hello everyone, this is Cereality or Polaris here, whatever you want to call me. And we're going to do the second half of the Awakening skills, because originally I did record this earlier actually, but Kunai Awakening wasn't quite out yet. I was just going to do it and then wrap up with Kunai Awakening in its own video, but Kunai Awakening came out, and there were a lot of changes to a decent amount of the Awakening skills. Some of them I might not talk about because again I'm only focusing on the second half, which is everything from canon onwards. Um, and I have every single awakening actually except for canon. So in terms of that one, I'm just going to have the bot do it because honestly there's not that much to talk about for canons. There used to be a lot more. And for people who knew about Canon Awakening when it launched, or when it was first released, you knew how much of a beast it was. Unfortunately though, now it is kind of arguably the second worst awakening skill in the game, and we'll get to why that is. So, first of all, some of the advantages of the awakening skill for cannon is that it doesn't use any ammunition, right? So if I switch to cannon here real quick, you can see that all your skills and stuff like that use ammo. And generally I think you can have them use a max of 3 bullets. But what was interesting about the awakening skill was it actually used 0 bullets. And so you only really had to worry about your mana. Although actually when it released we didn't have a mana bar, so it was basically just a free skill that you didn't have to worry about anything for, which is really good. Now you still have to worry about the mana, but it still doesn't use any ammo, which is really nice. Now originally when it released it did a lot of break. At least for a Slayer skill, it did around like 6 bars of break, and keep in mind the hitbox was huge for it. Unfortunately, they got rid of all the break. They nerfed the damage by half, so it used to do 10k damage over the whole entire duration. Now it only does around 6k. And again, since it does no break anymore, that means it has no hit stun, which means that its capability of being used in a combo is very low now. You could argue, well, maybe you can still use it for a team combo, right? If your teammate catches somebody from the other side of the map, you can just lightning trap over there and deal some damage. Issue with that is, why would you do that when you have a skill like flamethrower? I took off cannon. You have a skill with like flamethrower that, or dragon breath I think is what it's called, and it literally 100 to 0 somebody if you get all 3 ammo shots out on your dragon breath. It will literally 100 to 0. It does way more damage. You don't even have to be that close, and you can shift during like the whole duration of it. So why go for lightning trap if you could just do that? So right now it's not really a good awakening skill, and again they even reduced the radius of the skill as well, I believe. So it's actually this small, which is a lot smaller as you can see compared to what it was, and it does a lot less damage. And again, it does no hit stun, so even if I get hit out of the air, this would have originally broke me and I would have fallen down. It doesn't do that anymore. So right now it's a very niche skill. It used to be pretty good in PvE, I heard as well, and now it's kind of since it doesn't really do that. I mean, surely it does more damage in PvE, but again, the radius was a big issue. When they nerfed that, it kind of really destroyed its capabilities in PvE. But you know, so that's really much to it. A lot of people that ran it before on Canon don't really run it anymore because there's just better skills to use now. I think a lot of people use like Mist Trap, Ice Trap, and Dragon Breath. I think some people even use Slug Shot now. So yeah, most people end up dropping it. But that's about it for that one. Then we have the Scythe skill, which is called Death Blossom, I believe. I think that's the name of it, yes. And this one is an interesting skill. So it is actually a Scythe's only, well I guess second launch, first hit launch skill, being that it's a skill that is unshiftable if it breaks the opponent. Most of Scythe's other skills, if it breaks the opponent, they can still shift out. The only exception to that was Rising Wings, but considering how slow that is, it wasn't very likely that you would actually have that occur in neutral. This skill though is a lot better for neutral, and it's a lot safer for one compared to Rising Wings. So first of all, it's purple endurance. It's about the same as Storm Slash, which is pretty good because Scythe doesn't have too many of those. The only other skill that had it was actually Soul Taker. That's the only other one. Well, I guess Dark Mist too, but again, Dark Mist is kind of niche in its own regard. But for one, this has decent endurance. 2, it has pretty decent break, albeit most of the break is in the center of the move when the claws kind of come together at the end. It does most of its break right in the center of that skill. which is where it lifts the opponents up. That being said, it actually has a pretty decent radius. You can catch people from pretty far away. I don't actually know if this will work. I'll see if this works, but this might work. Yeah, no, not quite. But it can still catch people from decently far away. I think, like, yeah, so like it's still caught from all the way over there, and it pulls them towards you, similar to like Sword's Leap skill. It does pull them towards you if they do get broken, and it launches immediately again, which is really good. And of course, you can shift very soon as the skill is cast. There's very little animation lock on this. In fact, it's so safe that you can use it against a skill like Counter, which a lot of Awakening skills can actually do this, where you can trigger Counter basically while shifting out at the same time. So see, you can shift the counter because the same frame that the hitbox comes out for the skill, you are also able to shift. So it basically makes it an extremely safe skill in neutral, outside of Scythe Shift not being the greatest, obviously, but aside from that, it is very safe. It does break red endurance pretty fast. Again, overall, the break is mostly at the end, so it won't necessarily threaten a lot of skills as much as you would like it to. But in neutral, it can beat out dash attacks, especially slow ones like Hammer. If a Hammer or Sword or even Fist tries to dash attack you and you kind of read it with a Death Blossom, for one, even if they are able to get out, you're pretty safe. And if they aren't able to get out, they are going to be broken, they are going to get launched. It's going to be a free combo. And there's a lot you can do off of it, right? Like, there's very little end lag. You can even just follow up with like LMBs. Right clicks, you could follow up with your own dash attack or something. You could even, in theory, just tab and then change to whatever karma your other karma is and do a combo from there. So there's a lot of freeform you can do it with it, which is really nice. Obviously, again, the fact that the break is relatively low unless you're hitting the person in the center, and also most of the break comes at the end of the skill, does mean that it's not, again, that great for peeling. Or just threatening high endurance skills. Like, you can't really go into a skill like Storm Slash and then think that your Death Blossom is gonna like force them to shift or anything. It might if you get it like dead center on them, but honestly, like if you're this far away, the Death Blossom probably isn't gonna break the Storm Slash, which I think we can even demo that real quick. Like, it probably won't break it from here. Yeah, like you have to be very close to get all the break. Funny enough, though, it does do like a lot if you get the landing hit. In fact, I believe you can actually test it. Judgment right now is the highest endurance skill in the game. That doesn't have iframes, I guess. Technically, Counter does have more endurance, I think, but outside of that, I mean, you would never really know unless you like counter and ult. But outside of that, Judgment actually does the most, or has the most endurance, and it can break Judgment, as you can see, but you do have to be, they have to be in the center of your skill, so it's not likely for that to happen in a normal game. So again, and also it does pretty decent damage. Obviously, if you get all the hits, it does matter if you crit and stuff like that, but generally it's around 3.5k damage. It's not bad, not bad at all. But that's about it for the skill. I guess I should note that you can kind of move when you do the little rise up, which is kind of nice. There also was a bug, although it might have gotten fixed, where you could actually move around like during the whole skill. Like, as soon as you casted it, you could like move around while it was active. It was really weird. I don't know if it was like just a visual bug or anything, but it was something you could do before. But anyway, we will move on to Orb and Shield next. Alright. So let's start with Orbs. So Orbs was another one that was recently changed quite significantly. Lingering Souls, it basically on launch, it used to break people, but it would keep them standing. Most people compared it to like a ranged COE on Witch. It's very similar. It did about the same amount of damage. The only difference though was that it actually didn't even lift if the opponent was broken. So if they were broken but on the ground, the skill would not insta-lift them. It would lift them eventually. Generally after all the balls would rise up from the skill, it would lift the opponent then. But at the very beginning, it would break them but not lift them. Whereas COE, even if they were broken but on the ground, it would instantly lift them. So I always considered it to be a little bit worse. Obviously, the benefit of it was that you could use it from range, but it also kind of had weird break and damage. It's very similar, or it has some similar issues to Spirit Rain, where it's kind of RNG how much you get out of it. Generally, if you center the skill, it will do the most amount of damage, whereas opposed if you like get only on like the side of the skill, it will do a lot less damage. And so for one, a lot of the changes that happen to it's very similar to Lightning Trap. It has no break now. Because it has no break, similar to Lightning Trap, it has no hit stun, which means using it in a combo is a lot harder now. There are ways to do it, and I've seen them, although I think you might need Communion in order to use it. But also the damage has actually been significantly nerfed. Again, unless you're getting dead center, you saw it do like 2k if you're on the side. It's really only going to do barely even 2k. If you center it, it can do a lot more. You can see it does around like 4k, but funny enough, Star Tempest does more. Dimension Leap can do about the same, if not more, especially on a crit. So it's kind of iffy on whether you would actually want to use the skill or not. But again, you can use it from range, so I guess there's that. But again, it doesn't do any break. The damage, you have to make sure they're centered in the skill in order for it to work. And so it is not that great of a skill. A lot of people who ran Orb did drop that skill for other skills, like Dimension Leap or Star Tempest, which, or even Heartstopper, which either can still combo or just lead to a lot more damage, which Star Tempest right now I believe is the highest damage skill that Orb has. Heartstopper in theory is as well if you get the Tipper hitbox, but it's very rare that that happens, so generally Star Tempest is better, but also following up off of Star Tempest is basically impossible unless you have Shadow Pull. So again, it's a little bit weird. Orb's in a weird spot right now with this meta, and this skill is not helping it. Because it used to be a really good skill, it used to do a lot of damage, you could use it in combo, and now, again, very niche. It's barely usable in combo. There's like one example where you could do something like this, pop Communion, and do stuff like that. But again, not the best. Like there are probably better ways to do it. In fact, if I ran Dimension Leap there, I probably would have done more damage anyway. So again, kind of niche. A lot of people don't use it that much anymore. It doesn't offer that much, especially in neutral. And so we move on to shields. Shields is called Thunderous Charge. A lot of people just call it T-Charge because shield also has another skill called Charge. So this is basically just T-Charge, which is also a very niche skill. Do I recommend using it? Yes, because shield actually doesn't really have it. Similar to Orb, Shield doesn't have a lot of good skills right now because in the meta, with Tech Roll being a thing, Shield kind of benefited a lot from Tech Roll. In fact, they had to change the auto combo on Shield because it literally didn't work because of Tech Roll. Like, this combo literally didn't work because Tech Roll was a thing. Now they did fix it so that you could do it, which is nice, but it was still, like, kind of insane that they had to do that. But at least they did it. That, of course, though, is for the commands and not the skills, and so, again, Shield doesn't have a lot of good skills to keep up with the fact that a lot of things are tech rollable. But T-Charge generally isn't that bad of a skill. For one, similar to the Scythe Awakening skill, it does give you purple endurance, around the same as Storm Slash. It also is chaseable, which is really nice. Having a chaseable skill is always good because it means that you can basically throw a mix-up. Because if you land it, there is still room for you to do a tab chase, so you get a mix-up of like, are you going to go up into the air or are you going to stay in the ground? Which is always nice. But, well, let's still talk about some of the positives of the skill. So it's got pretty good endurance, or pretty decent endurance. It's got, another thing is it has iframes on it. So during the backflip animation, I kind of flash white a little bit, and you can see it on my health bar as well. It'll flash yellow. And you get around 18-19 frames of invincibility, which is pretty good because it does mean you could like react to a skill like stun hit, in theory, and punish it, guaranteed. So if you see a skill like stun hit, you could like punish it, similar to that, and then get a catch, which is also really good. Now here are some issues about it. There are a lot of issues with this skill. For one, the skill itself does not do a lot of break. In fact, I believe it only breaks what Fortitude used to do, which was like 5 bars of endurance. I don't know. It does like 5 or 5.5 bars of endurance. This is a big issue because what does it mean? It means skills like Spinning Strike won't necessarily beat it, but will be completely safe against it. So as you can see, it didn't actually break it, and I'm kind of lucky that it auto-corrected for the second hit, because there's a lot of cases, similar to Shield's counter skill, which also had the same issue. If you are hitting somebody who is in a moving skill and it doesn't break them, there's a very high chance that second part is going to whiff. But either way, the first hit not dealing a lot of break is an issue. For one, it's also actually 2 hits. If you notice, this whole thing is 3 hits in general. The first impact is 2 hits, and this is an issue because it means every single individual hit of those 2 hits only does 2.5 bars of break. That's actually not enough per individual hit to beat a red endurance skill, which means if you encounter scenarios where, for example, I showed off it beating stun hit, it's very possible, and I've had this happen, where you connect one of the hits of the first impact, and because of that, it will guarantee go into the second part. But the second hit didn't connect on that first impact, and so it doesn't actually break the stun hit, because 2.5 bars of endurance is not enough, or 2.5 bars of break is not enough to break stun hit, which is around 3 bars, or 3.5. So it doesn't break the stun hit, you get locked into doing the second half, or the second part of the animation, and you're just going to take the stun hit and lose. So there are a lot of situations where that happens, because the hitbox on the first hit is really not that good. In fact, it's so bad that there's a lot of times, and I can demo it here as well, it does not have a good hitbox. Like, you can literally jump over it. Like, you can jump over it. It is very easy to jump over. And not only is it easy to jump over, it just doesn't have any tracking. I argue that this is basically kind of like a worse version of Fist skill, because they both kind of do very similar things. They're both kind of charge-esque skills, and they both are pretty much free catches when you do land them. But whereas Blazing Fist, if I just walk, it will track me pretty well. And that's just me walking. Obviously, if I dash, it might not track as well. But walking, at least, it can track me. I can't say the same thing about the shield skill, because that actually gets beaten by walking. If I just walk, it gets beaten. Even if I'm up here, as long as I just walk and hold a direction, it will not track me. Or it will, but it won't do it enough to the point where it'll actually get a catch. So you can literally just outwalk, or, I mean, for sure you can outdash, but you can literally just walk past the skill. Like, you don't even have to spend stamina to dodge the skill, which is actually kind of insane. But not only that, so when you whiff the skill, there is actually animation lock. There is animation lock before you can shift, and you can kind of see it before my shift becomes available. You can kind of see that there's like a gap before I'm allowed to shift. It does get reduced significantly if you hold a direction key, so you should always be holding a direction key, because if you don't hold a direction key, it becomes an even bigger window. But either way, there is a window. What does that mean? Very similar to Whirlwind, which also has a whiff window where you can be punished. This one also has a whiff window where you can be punished. It's a lot less significant than Whirlwind. I think Whirlwind's is around like 30 frames. It's like 20 to 30 frames where you can be punished. This one is a 10 frame window, which obviously isn't nearly as much. But it's still a window where you can be punished, which means that there's still scenarios where, like, if I see them coming, I can literally do that, and that's a guaranteed punish. And the skill isn't that fast. It's only, like, it's around 30 or more frames, which is around the same speed as, like, maybe a leap if you're leaping on yourself, if not even slower. So there's a lot of cases where it's just going to get punished if you see it coming. If you know that they're going to do it and you can react to it, you can get a punish. It's not that difficult. And honestly, there's some skills that, you know, besides shifting it, another issue with this skill, which you can see, is that when the first hit does connect and you are forced to go into that second part, there is an animation lock window for a long time. That's how early I can shift out. I have to let that second hit connect. But again, we already talked about how the first hit doesn't do that much break, or the first impact doesn't do that much break. And what that means is that there's situations, such as Leap, which is a skill that has purple endurance, where the first hit will connect, or the first impact will connect, not break Leap, and you are now forced to commit to your second one, which will still get beaten by the Leap. So, for example, if we activate skills at the same time, and actually the AI does it late, by the way, too, so the AI casted it late. But what would happen is they leaped, I hit them with the first part of the skill, had to go into the second part of the skill because I cannot shift, and I have to take the leap. So you could literally react to T-charge with leap and win, because you actually want, if you see somebody use T-charge, you actually want to use a high endurance skill that will force them to connect it, because you're gonna lock their shift out, or you're gonna lock them from shifting out, and they're gonna have to be forced to tank the skill, which is very detrimental, especially in a lot of cases against Sword and Fist, which have a lot of skills that can easily break shield. So again, this skill has a lot of problems already, which is very common for a lot of shield skills, as a lot of them have a lot of issues. They're not overall completely good. But it's still a pretty good skill. I would run it over counter, especially now that counter basically leads to nothing unless you're like bow, maybe. Outside of that, though, it doesn't really lead to anything, and so it's not really worth using it, in my opinion. Also to note, the damage is not actually that great on this skill. In fact, that was actually a high damage output. Generally, it's like 2.5k, like you see, it's actually the lowest damage of all the breaker skills. Sometimes I think I saw it even do like 2k once if you get a really low roll, like that. So it can do very little damage, which is not amazing. But that's about it. That's all I have to say about it. Still pretty good. It is kind of hard to combo into it. There are some... I don't even understand how that dropped. That's not supposed to drop. Oh well. But there are some ways you can do some setups into it. I've seen do stuff like this. It does get a bit sketchy though. Obviously the easiest one is to just skill cancel. If you run Battle Cry, you could just skill cancel. That's probably the best way to do it. But there are definitely a few ways, and it is a neutral tool that you can use. Although it is mainly reactionary, you wouldn't just go towards somebody and use it because it's probably not going to hit. But yeah, that's probably all I have to say about that. And then next we will move on to Kunais. Alright, so Kunai's Awakening skill was released pretty recently, and so because of that, unlike a lot of the other Awakening skills that have had changes since launch, Kunai's Awakening skill has not really been changed at all since launch. And so it's basically as it is, again, according to when this video is released, or as of when this video is released, it will not have changed that much. That doesn't mean it won't change in the future, especially because Season 9 is now, from the date that this video is being released, presumably if it's the day I'm recording it, or even the day after, it will, Season 9 will be starting in a very couple of days, and there's a high chance that some of the Awakening skills do see a lot of changes, including Kunai's. But again, for now, take it as you will. So, first off, this skill has some interesting factors about it. It is the only Awakening skill I believe that can be used in the air. This is a very common trope for a lot of Kunai skills, however, is that you can generally use Kunai skills in the air. That's kind of Kunai's whole thing. I think there's only one skill, which is Thunder Wolves, that you can't use in the air. All the other ones you can. So you can use it in the air, you can use it on the ground, and funny enough, it doesn't have any endurance. Its break is okay, but I wouldn't count on it for the break because you don't have any endurance to associate with it, so I wouldn't necessarily go for it in neutral. But it does do pretty decent damage. This isn't on the ground, and you can see it does almost like 4k damage, which is, so it's not too bad. It also does a lot of hits, like just an insane amount of hits. But you'll notice actually there's like a little hop that I do right at the end there. So there is kind of like a micro end lag to the skill, and of course you are animation locked for the whole duration of the skill. You can't shift until that hop is over. Until you land and until that hop is over, you are completely locked out of your shift, so you do have to keep that in mind. But again, you do get a lot of damage, and one of the funny things is, as you could see, I went up and then I went down when I used the skill. This skill is a dive skill, basically. It will continue until you hit the floor. What does that mean? Well, it means that the higher you are, the more damage it will do. Thus, if you are using a Karma-like shield, which has a very high window for its dash attack, or it's a very high trajectory, rather that it sends into chase, it means that if you do something like this, you can get a lot more damage. In fact, here, I can do it even without the left click. It does around 5 to 6k damage if you land it in very high in the air, which boosts the amount of burst that Kunai can do by a lot, especially because Kunai generally actually struggled a lot when it came to its skill damage, especially with the nerfs that they did, which a lot of them were for a reason, obviously, but Kunai did generally lack a lot of skill damage with its highest damaging skills, maybe dealing around like 3k if you were lucky, but a lot of them actually dealt like 1k, maybe 1.5, which was actually more in line with what breakers were dealing when they used skills. So this is actually the first like really high damage skill, and actually gives Kunai arguably the biggest or fastest burst in the game, because when you combine it with options, oh hold up, I messed up there because I wanted to. You know, you get like 8k damage in like nearly 5 seconds off of just 2 skills. Like honestly, just doing Blink Kunai into the Awakening skill can lead to a lot of damage. And I don't even think I landed all the hits. I probably could do that better. Yeah, I mean look at that. That was like 8k damage in what, like 5-6 seconds. It's really high burst damage, and I'd argue probably Kunai has the highest burst damage right now because of the Awakening skill. So obviously you get the advantage of having really insane damage, especially when you're in the air, which Kunai is going to be in the air a lot. It's just a very, very good skill overall. It does lack neutral capability, or like a reason to use it in neutral, and you might say, well, yeah, of course it's a Slayer. Well, there are Slayer Awakening skills that have a use in neutral if you want to use them in neutral, right? You know, Lightning Trap and the Orb Awakening skill prior to them being nerfed weren't that bad. In fact, especially Lightning Trap was really good at just picking up people from across the map and poking them and breaking them, forcing shifts and stuff like that. Same thing for the Orb Awakening skill. They can't do that anymore, and Kunai's skill can't really do that either. I would not ever forcibly use it in neutral. It's just not a good idea. Just save it for the burst so that at least you can get like 5, 6, you know, maybe 7k damage before you have to shift anyway. And if you do it off of Blink Kunai, you basically get 8, 9k damage guaranteed before you have to go, which is going to be extremely beneficial. It doesn't really help a lot with team combos, but Kunai never really was that type of karma. It's very solo oriented. All the karmas are kind of done, or all the combos that you're doing with Kunai are generally going to be just by yourself. You don't really have many tools that help with the combo, because all your skills kind of take the enemy with you, whether it's a skill like Lightning Drop, or you know, again, this skill also drags the enemy with you. You just have a lot of stuff that kind of redirects the enemy towards you, or in whatever direction you're going. But again, does good damage. I would highly recommend you take this skill. It's very, very good damage output, which is something that Kunai really needs. And so that's probably about it for all the Awakening skills. There's not much more to say about the Kunai one. It's very basic. Again, just does a lot of damage. Not much else. And yeah, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you perhaps when Season 9 comes out, and there may or may not be a new karma associated with it. So, again, see you guys then.